Hi, good evening, and thank you very much for coming for another lecture presentation in the series, How to Use Science to Understand Love. And this will be the most technical one, but it is about phrenology and functional MRI. As you know, this presentation is going to be recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube so you can watch it over there. And it is available to anybody who has internet connection. So you can send the information and invite anybody you want anywhere in the world. You don't have to ask for any permission of anybody. If you're using a small device like a phone or a pad, I recommend that you put it in landscape mode so you can see the slides better. If you hear any echoing, I recommend that you use headphones or an earbuds. And with that in mind, let's get started and start our talk today about functional MRI and phrenology. And I have two titles for today's speech. One is phrenology coming back in a new disguise? And if you don't know what's phrenology, I thought I'll give it a different title. Is functional MRI real science, or is functional MRI the new phrenology? We're going back to phrenology again. And my name is Fred Nour. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a neurologist from USA. So my specialty is the brain. So I'll focus about MRI of the brain and functional MRI of the brain, and phrenology is related to the brain. And again, is part of this series called How to Understand Love and Be Happier, or Love Explained by Science, or Love Based on Physical Brain Science. And you probably ask yourself and wonder what the relationship between phrenology, functional MRI, and love. I want to learn about love, and that's what mattered to me. Why you talk about phrenology and functional MRI? What does it have to do with love? Why should I listen to this discussion? Simply because you plan your future and future happiness and love based on the information you have. And you want to make sure that the information you have is based on reality. Like an analogy, a person who is trying to build a house, you want to make sure that he is building the house on rock, so it will last for hundreds of years. And he want to make sure that he is not building the house on sand, because he knows with sand, the first storm that will come, the house will be blown away. It's the same if you want to plan your happiness based on love, and if you want to understand love, you have to make sure that the sources of information are good, reliable, and real science. So this is to tell you whether functional MRI is real science or is a fallacy. Whether you should pay attention when you read a book, whether the information in it is based on functional MRI or is based on real science. So you can decide if you want to believe in and follow the advice, or is the book just what I call Hollywood medicine, it's just for entertainment, but not to be taken seriously. So let's say that the lecture will be divided into two parts. We'll look at the past, we'll look at something called phrenology to learn from it, and then we'll apply that to the present and the functional MRI. So let's start with the first part, phrenology. You probably have seen a picture of a head with this writing on it, and that was based on phrenology. Let's come close and take a look. And you can see here the skull divided in little area. This is area for hope. This is hope for the future, hope for the present, for speculation. This area for consciousness, this is cautiousness, secretiveness, and so on. Every ability in the brain have a center. And that was all defined by a field that used to be very popular in the 19th century called phrenology. So what exactly is phrenology? It's two words together. Phreno meaning mind or thinking, logos meaning knowledge or science. So the science of the mind or the science of thinking. When did it start? Started in 1798, at the end of the 18th century, very close to the beginning of the 19th century, when an Austrian physician called Franz Joseph Gall conceived it and made it popular. So what are the concepts behind it? First concept is that the brain is like a muscle. When you use the muscle, it gets bigger. When you don't use the muscle, it shrinks. So the same, when you use the brain gets bigger. If you don't use the brain, it shrinks. Second concept is that the brain is composed of different areas, each one area for one specific function. Like the company, it has marketing department, it has a sales department, have manufacturing department, it have human resources. Each one is a specific location, each one have a specific function. So these phrenologists felt that the brain is exactly the same. Every personality trait, every thinking feature have a specific location, and they simply have to find it, study it, and then they know the brain, and this is the science of the mind. Third concept is that if you use a specific area faculty or certain function, it will get bigger and it's going to push the skull up above it. And if you don't use it, the faculty will shrink and the skull above it will sag down. Based on that, if you measure the specific location for specific faculty ability, for example, carriage, there's an area for carriage and you measure it, you can detect if a person possesses the faculty, because with more carriage, it's going to be pushed up, or if he doesn't have it, with less carriage, it's going to be pushed down. In other words, you go to the phrenologist and he knows exactly where in your head is the area for carriage and he's going to measure it until yes, it's bulging out by 2 or 3 millimeters. You are brave. Oh, sorry, fellow, it's pushed down by 2 millimeters. You are a coward. And this supposedly based on physical brain science. And the tool of the trade with this thing here called the caliper, where you can put something between the two. You can measure it here. If you open it more, you can see it here. And there were 100 different designs of measuring that. This is the only picture I can find where this person's head is being measured from here and here in different areas to find the dimensions of different parts. The head measures. And based on that, they claim, and they are the phrenologists of the 19th century, that they identify every area responsible for every type of behavior, every personality trait, hope, conscientiousness, cautiousness, sublimity, ideality, you name it, they found the location for it. And all we have to do is measure this area. If this is raised up, you have good hope for the future. If it's pushed down, you have no hope for the future. The same for the present here, and so on. And most important is to know that at the time, each one of them repeated the same thing, that phrenology is the only field of medicine based on true science. And for the whole 19th century, everybody everywhere believed that phrenology is the only field of medicine based on true science. We finally advanced scientifically, where we can study the mind, and thank God to the field of phrenology, and thank God we have these people called phrenologists around. And if you ask yourself a question, how come that you as a doctor know about phrenology and I don't? Why that? I haven't heard about it that much. Simply because it's part of a lesson that we learn as a medical profession that is few centuries old. We learn over the years that things come and go, and that we are trained to look at things more carefully through the so-called journal clubs, where you meet, you bring one article, and you all analyze it and try to read between the lines, try to find what makes sense and what doesn't, what was done correctly, what was missing. In other words, you try to dissect it and separate true news from fake news. You try to find out if the article is based on reality and should be believed, or not based on reality and should be ignored. And part of the journal clubs is something called classical articles. Classical articles mean they bring you an article that's old, 50 years old, 100, 150 years old, and another article on the same topic that is current. And you read the first article and see how convincing and powerful the information and the data is, and that you should have made the conclusion that they did in the past. And then they show you the new article, how everything you learned in the past was completely and totally wrong, and how finding more information or more details, it is realized that what you knew before was completely wrong. The whole idea is to have you as a physician be open-minded, questioning that what you know is actually the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It is possible that whatever you believe in now could later on turn to be completely wrong. So you don't become like the people that say, I believe in global warming. If you don't, you are terrible and I hate you, or the other way around. You have to know that science is not always very definitive, and whatever you know for a fact could later on be discovered to be totally wrong. Let me give you an example. There's a medical disease called myasthenia gravis. Maya meaning muscle, athenia meaning weakness, gravis from grave. It puts you in the grave, meaning it kills you. And in the past, I have seen papers published to show how if you give that patient cortisone, you kill them. And it was believed at the time of this publication that cortisone is definitely contraindicated, and any doctor who intentionally or accidentally give it is disqualified from practicing medicine for committing a serious mistake. Then you give in another paper where you find out that today we treat the same disease by doing the opposite. We give patients cortisone. We figured out what we were doing before with the cortisone. We were giving too much too quickly. We discovered that either we give it small dose over a longer period of time, or we give it in the same old way but put the patient on a ventilator, and that the old effect lasts only a couple of weeks and the patient is fine after that. In other words, what we believed in the past, that cortisone is fatal to the patient, has changed, and it's actually the correct treatment for the patient. And again, you learn as a physician to look at the past and look at the present and realize what you know today could be completely wrong tomorrow, that you should keep your eyes open, you keep your mind open. So based on that, we also studied phrenology to know that in the past, what was thought to be a definite science tend to be pseudoscience and garbage, and that's why I know about it. And it used to be considered a real science. Look, this is the American Phrenological Journal, and you see the different picture of different abilities in the brain. This is 1848, the middle of the 19th century, very popular. And you have the so-called peer-reviewed journal publication, meaning phrenologists will have other phrenologists review that, and many times you believe this is evidence that it is correct, which I believe is very misleading. Let me give you an example. A schizophrenic can sit down and write his hallucinations. You give it to another peer, meaning another schizophrenic, who will read and say, wow, what a wonderful hallucination, you're genius, you're great. But in reality, we know that the first guy is crazy and the second guy is crazy because both are crazies, both are peers, they cannot see each other's problems. So a problem in science is when you give an area to another peer, the other peer will believe like you more or less the same. It's like imagine if you go during the peak of communism in Russia And you have somebody describing communism, how wonderful it is, and his opinion are reviewed by other communists. Of course, everybody will agree and say this is wonderful. But later on, he discovered that it never worked anywhere, and that it's not always a good idea to have the so-called peer-reviewed, or at least peer-reviewed does not guarantee that it's real science. It guarantees that your peers have the same opinion as you, and that's it. So it was also considered a science because there was institution for you to go to and update your information. This American Institute of Phrenology in New York on 27 East 21st Street. And there you go to have the state of the art education and to learn the skills. And they're everywhere, New York, Edinburgh, Paris, everywhere in the world they had one. Because at the 19th century, phrenology was believed to be a real science, and these findings were true. And let me give you some examples about some findings that was considered at the time called beyond debate. It's like the earth is round. You don't try to argue with me that it's not true. It is, and if you disagree, then you're just ignorant and you better shut up. And look at the deception of pseudoscience as well as the harm from pseudoscience. This is a book about phrenology, and I copied some pages to show you some of the accepted beliefs at the time that was thought to be based on real science. They said that they had a three part. This part is for the intellect, this part is for the force, this part for the appetite. So this guy had this part is big, he has a big appetite, he's going to eat a lot of food. This guy have this part big ears, a lot of force is going to beat you up. Stay away from this guy when you see somebody like this. This guy with a big part here, this guy is smart. This is intelligent. This is the one you have to use as a counselor. And heard about superstition, it's physical. They found the perfect definite source for it in the brain. They did scientific studies. They are the phrenologists of the 19th century and found that. And this guy, suppose he have the shape of the head that says standard of laziness. If a woman is looking for a husband, take him to the phrenologist. They measure that. Then, sorry, ma'am, he is going to be lazy. He'll never help you wash up the dishes or clean up the dining table after you eat. He's going to be lazy, look for another husband. And a man can take his wife, and the phrenologist find out this is a Roman nose, and she has a Roman nose, and this is bad news because surely too many woman noses in one family going to be fighting and battles. Sorry, ma'am, I can't marry you. I have to find another woman with a different nose because the shape of your nose tell us about your personality. And God bless you if at the time you had a nose like that. Good luck finding a husband. Beauty maybe can help, but shape of the nose, no, it can hurt you big time. And they believe you can find different parts in the face about the heart, the lung, the stomach. It's all over there. Just measure it and you do that. And they looked at noses, different kind of noses. And very important part, this is the center for personality. You see how it's pushed out? This guy has strong personality. This is the guy you want. It was pushed in, he has weak personality. You can push him around. And I particularly like the ears. A woman meets a man, take him to the phrenologist, examine his ears, say, no, this guy is feminine. Careful, madam. He could be gay or homosexual. Don't marry him. Marry a guy like this. This is a masculine ear. This guy is going to be a macho. And this pointed one, oh no, he's selfish. Stay away from him. And women who love shopping, you need to marry a man like this, with this shape. Phrenologists tell you, this is the one who can say no. You just go to the shopping and he pays and never complains. This is the perfect husband. And look at this guy, how this is bulging here. This is vital magnetism. This guy goes to the party and everybody pays attention to him. Look at this area here for this guy who's pushed in. It's lacking. It never grew. He doesn't have the vital magnetism. He goes to a party and he's boring. Nobody will listen to him. And the phrenologists convinced people at the time that this was real and real science. This guy with a big head is a thinker. This guy with this shapes here is a looker. He look, and if a woman is looking for a man to raise a family, she wants a good father. So she take him to the phrenology, look at this area. This is the center for good parenthood or fatherhood. It's bulging out. He's going to be a genuine father. It will be good for the kids. And sadly, this guy had it pushed. Every woman he meet will take him to the phrenologist and will tell you, I'm sorry, I want to have a good family. You are not a good father. It's physically proven. Interesting. Benefit or harm to the society. Science or garbage science. And if you're a man looking for a woman, you want to take this one and say, look, this is coming out. She is a good mother. This is the center for motherhood. And this poor woman is pushed in. She's not a good mother. She's going to neglect the kids. You don't marry her. If you have a woman and have a dent like this, good luck finding a husband, especially with a nose like this. Every phrenologist will advise every man to stay away from you based on physical science of the 19th century, the phrenology. So there was societal harm, no doubt about it. Some people went to jail for crime they never committed because their guilt center or lying center was bulging out, so whatever they say is proven to be a lie. While other people murdered somebody with three witnesses, but they went to the phrenologist and they measured the skull and found their honesty center is bulging out. They're very honest. So the jury should believe that this guy didn't kill them and ignore the three witnesses that have seen him murder that person. Injustice, but based on what was believed at the time, the true science of the mind of the 19th century by the phrenologists. There were claims of racial superiority based on the shapes of the heads. Other examples, and to do that, let's do a little experiment. Let me ask you a question. Which side of the brain is music? And maybe which side of the brain is language? So we'll ask you to use the picture to raise your hand up. I want to see how many of you believe that the left side of the brain have the speech center. Very good. Almost everybody raise his hand, okay? And which one of you will say the left side of the brain have the music center? Okay, very good. Nobody. Now let's switch to the right side. Is the right side of the brain, does it have a speech center? Who believe it does? Nobody, which is correct. What about the right side of the brain? Does it have the music center? Yes, I see two-thirds of the people raise their arm. Very interesting. So everybody today in 2020 believe that music is on the right side of the brain. However, if we look at something else called hemispherectomy, meaning somebody has a tumor on the right side of the brain and we completely remove it. Do they enjoy music? They enjoy it exactly the same as those who remove the left half of the brain. In other words, it's not true that the right side of the brain have the music center. It is actually in both of them, because it doesn't matter which half you remove, people continue to enjoy music in the same way. So the old phrenology believed that left side is for speech, right side is for music. Is not true. There's a speech center on the left. This is correct. But there's no speech center on the right. But look, from the 19th century to the 20th centuries to the 21st century, and still people believe that music is in the right half of the brain. And most likely in the next century, will continue to tell each other things that are wrong. And what motivates these people is debatable. Some of it is many of them became very rich because selling models of the skull, which are available for sale until now. The pictures I showed you were actually a model of a skull that I bought from Amazon. They're still made, still people buy it, still people put it there. And the same for the drawing of the heads, marking the areas for the different core faculties. So you can know where honesty, integrity, or lying, or hope, or all of that is. So you can check people that come to visit you at home. And they made a lot of money from that. So here are some of the areas I like hope, conscientiousness, and so on. And millions and millions of these were sold. And that's why today, when you go to the market for the antiques in France, different parts of France, you find a lot of these are still left from the 19th centuries because most people had one. Most people had a globe about geography and one of these heads to understand visitors and everybody what it's like. But luckily, eventually it fell. But it wasn't easy. Pseudoscience is very difficult to eradicate. It took many years, it took many people, and each one who tried to criticize it was accused of what? You don't know enough, so you're ignorant. You don't know enough phrenology to judge it. Or you have ulterior motive. You hate us because we make a lot of money and you're poor, or you want us to be just poor like you, or you want to make more money. But no, 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 it is biased, it is ignorance of you, and that continued until a final definitive blow came. That was the skull X ray. At the end of the 19th century, in 1895, a guy called Wilhelm Röntgen discovered X rays. And within the next 5 or 10 years, the beginning of the 20th centuries, skull X-ray became very common and popular. So people start to see the skull, start to realize that the inside of the skull, the outside is not the same. The thickness here is different from here. Look how thick it is here, how much thinner here. It is not the same thickness. And people concluded that based on physical seeing, and we say seeing is believing, is that there's absolutely no relationship between the outside surface of the skull and the inside surface. And based on that, the outside shape of the skull has nothing to do with the size of any area of the brain underneath it. In other words, an absolute garbage that you can measure all these areas and say this area is for courage, push up, and you're brave, push down, you're not brave. The same skull can be different thickness in different people, same part of the skull, I mean, and so on. So it was finally realized that this is pseudoscience. And finally, after 100 years, this episode of the pseudoscience have disappeared. But it's not the end of pseudoscience. It's not the end of phrenology. It's an end of one episode of this. Pseudoscience is very old, is there today, and will always be there tomorrow. Now is just the beginning of a new episode of pseudoscience. Pseudoscience really never dies because somehow people have the desire for things that reality cannot deliver and they're willing to buy it. Where the saying goes, whenever there's a buyer, there's always a seller. Whatever you want to buy, you find somebody willing to convince you that they have it and they can sell it to you. And actually, it's very difficult to make it disappear because even today, if you go to the internet, you're going to find phrenology websites. If you go to Amazon, other place, you're going to find phrenology books for sale. You're going to find skulls for sale like the one I bought, and so on. You're going to find that you today in 2020 still have some beliefs from the old phrenology where music and the right side of the brain. Very difficult to kill that. So the famous American writer Mark Twain was right when he said that it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Nobody ever believed that they're stupid. Everybody think I'm so smart. I will be able to tell right away. Oh, of course, I can tell what's real and what is not. I can separate fake news from real news. I'm so smart, so don't try to tell me that I've been fooled. But in reality, it's much easier to fool you than to convince you that you're fooled. So let's switch gears. We talked about phrenology and how they divided the brain to different areas for every function. based on the series elevated and down and measured it, and we concluded that at the end tend to be pseudoscience. It was garbage. Now at the present, what's happening? We have a new tool for phrenology. Phrenology didn't die. We're still trying to find a center for everything in the brain, everything we do. But the old method of measuring is out. We have a new technique, new technology called functional MRI. I pay attention that the word functional is in italic. Everything is not. To get you to pay attention to the word functional. It's different from just saying MRI. Because first, let's talk about the so-called traditional MRI. This is the one that you and your neighbor and family have had, and millions of them have been ordered. But doctors don't use the word traditional, they use the word just MRI, which is short for traditional MRI. But what is it? In the 70s, they discovered something called nuclear magnetic resonance, that the nucleus have electromagnetic field, then you can study by radio wave. 1977, Damadian came and was first one to be able to generate images using that, called the magnetic resonance imaging, or for short MRI. So there's a magnet, there's something called resonance, and from the two you form an image. So how is it done? First, you put the head of the patient in a magnetic field, in a magnet. The idea is to line up all the nuclei facing one direction. So the positive will be facing north, or the negative facing south. And then you send radio wave that will hit them and bounce back. And then we generate images by the radio wave that are coming back, and this will give you the density of the nuclei. If the nuclei is very close together, you bounce back a lot, and give you like a white color. If they are intermediate in density, give you gray color. If they're very dispersed, they give you black color. Like what? Look at this picture. Do you know what it is? It's looking at Paris from the sky. And if you look, you can see area that's a bit whiter here, which is the loop around Paris. You can see a line here, which is probably the river. I can see here a little bit more light in this neighborhood, the 18 arrondissement, because it's more densely populated, so there's more light. And here the 7th arrondissement, with a little bit less populated, so there's less light. You can see here there's some part that doesn't have a lot of light, maybe not many people living here, maybe it's a wooded area, and so on. So you can look at the intensity of the light and form a picture to tell you about Paris. And that's basically what we do in traditional MRI. We put the head in magnetic field, send radio wave, and generate this image. You can see the nose, the mouth, the eyes here. You can see areas in the brain. Some are black, some are gray. This is whiter, and so on. So you can form up pictures of that. And then it's like a ball. You can slide the ball and look at slices. This is an orange. You can slice the orange into different slices and just take one slice and look at it. And you can have that picture here as opposed to the rounded picture. So this picture here is a slice here. He cut it down and looking down this way. And you can see the outside of the skull. You can see the inside where some are gray, some are light gray, medium gray, and that's how we see the inside of the brain. The shades of brain, and this is traditional MRI, or for short, just MRI. And now, we know it measures structures. Like looking at Paris from the sky, you can say where are the roads, where are the highways, where there's more light, where there's less light. But can you measure function? Can you measure life in Paris and say this part people are alive or dead? You could be dead and still have the lights on. You cannot tell from the light whether the people inside the apartments are alive or dead. What about MRI? Let's look at an MRI done before death. That person had an MRI and the picture looked like that. Then he died, but they decided to repeat the MRI after death. And what they see? Exactly the same. There's no difference. So if somebody dies, have an MRI, and you send it to a radiologist, the report is going to say what? Normal MRI of the brain. No abnormality detected, but he's dead. But we cannot say that. We just look at the structure, the lights. the density of the nuclei. As long as they are there, we'll be able to see that. If the density changes, then we'll be able to change colors and see that this area here has changed colors. So, in summary, traditional MRI is based on unquestionable science. This is the truth. This is the true news. It is very useful, very reliable, and consistent. It is used very frequently by the medical profession. You know, you might have one yourself, your family, your neighbor, you know somebody who had an MRI, and we are here talking about traditional MRI. Now, time to know that MRI to neurology is very well established and known by everybody, like this guy in France. You know this guy? His name is President Macron. He's the president of France. Everybody knows him. Everybody listens to him. Everybody's staying home now during the coronavirus epidemic because of orders from him. So this man to France is what MRI to neurology. Now let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about something else that's different called functional MRI. Again, it's different. Pay attention to that. Functional is in italic to tell you it's a different. Sometimes for short you put it a small f. But MRI and fMRI are not the same. Let's look at history of functional MRI. It was discovered in 1990, invented by a guy called Ogawa, and he was a physicist. He's not a physician or anything, he was a physicist. We're at AT&T, it's American Telephone and Telegraph Lab. He was doing research for the phone company to find better ways for the phone service. So it came 20 years after traditional MRI. And he had some concepts. First concept is that the brain is composed of what he called systems or networks. So this is network 1 here, this network 2 here. And a dopamine represents one network. So this is all dopamine cells. Serotonin is another network, and so on. So there are different networks. Every group of chemicals in the brain belongs to one network. Okay, what else? Each network is composed of multiple cell members connected by electric wires called axons. So network 1, say dopamine, there's cell 1, electric wire go to cell 2, electric wire to cell 3, and so on. And that these cell members work in sequence and independent of each other. So A has to go to B, B go to C. B cannot go back to A cannot go to C. It has to follow exactly that sequence and has nothing to do with the other network. Okay, let's keep moving. Now, the cell members have to use energy to send the signal to the next one. It's like a player here kicking the ball to the next one. He has to use energy to kick the ball to get to this one. Now he has to use energy to kick the ball to the second one, and so on. And when he gets to do that, he uses energy like cell activation. Like saying the car is off, so not using any energy. Now you have to drive the car from here to here. So you have to turn the car in. You consume gasoline to move. You use energy. And this turning the car on, they call it cell activation. You turn the switch on, but instead of being dead. And they can measure that. Look at the word statistically, italic and bold. It's all depending on numbers, statistics. And it's graphed over a traditional MRI. So it's a photoshopped image where one is a traditional MRI and photoshopped over it is a statistical graph. And the two together produce the functional MRI image. So important to note that an MRI image is different from functional MRI. Functional MRI is two images overlapping each other's. And MRI is not, it's just one image only. And that's done by software like Photoshop is done for pictures. Another concept is that the network is inactive at rest. If you're doing nothing, like the car is turned off, it's not doing anything, consuming little energy, no energy. The car is not running, doesn't consume any gas. They call that the default mode of the network. Like the car is normally in your garage, Doesn't run, don't consume any gas. And when there's a demand for mental activity, when you decide to go somewhere, the network will activate. You turn the car on, and now you're consuming more energy. Now you're burning the gas. Concept 3, the brain cells don't store oxygen. The car contains no gasoline inside. So activation, when you turn the car on, you have to get the gasoline from around the car, from the outside. And that could be measured by so-called susceptibility image by a bold signal. It's technical, but I'm going to dig into it because this scientist who knows it very well always flash the word bold signal and susceptibility, and the bold signal did this and that, and everything lit up like a Christmas tree. Like, it's dark, turn the light on, you can see the light, you cannot miss it. You have to be blind, you just black and white like that because of this bold signal. What the hell is bold signal? Stand for blood oxygen level dependent signal, meaning a signal that depends on how much oxygen level is there. So what are you measuring? You're measuring oxygen. But the bold signal showed dopamine dumped out like lighting a Christmas tree. You measure oxygen and you talk about dopamine, apparently for them is the same. But if you know science, it's not. And what is the susceptibility image? A bit technical, but let's say if you put a molecule inside a magnet, it will move toward the positive or the negative pole depending on electric charge. If it's negative, it's going to be pulled toward the positive one. If it's positive, going to be going toward the negative one. And we know that oxygen is two negative charges. So oxyhemoglobin, when you load the oxygen, it was two negative, you become positively charges, you run toward the negative pole. So you can use that detected movement to create some pictures called susceptibility image. But pay attention, you are measuring direction of movement based on oxygen. You're not measuring any chemical substance. But this interesting scientists tell you, no, 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 the brain was pumping dopamine and it lit like a Christmas tree. That's not real science. That is Hollywood medicine. And I hope it's more clear now that the brain cells don't store oxygen. The car has no gasoline, so you need gasoline. It sucks it from the outside, and you can generate pictures statistically by measuring the movement of a molecule and overlap the statistical image on another real image producing the functional MRI. So let's look what it is. These are two different experiments. This one to the left, one to the right. These are two slices in the brain, like the oranges. You can take one slice higher up on the orange one a little bit lower. So this is the level called the midbrain. This is the level of the pons. And they did the experiment multiple times. Then they added number 1, 3, 5, 7, and 2, 4, 6, and 8 to try to show this consistency in the findings. So this is the even runs combined together, the odd runs combined together. Two levels, two levels. And here people are reacting to looking at a face. And supposedly it will show that you have emotion from reacting to the face, and the emotion happen here and this part of the brain, here, and so on. And then the same experiment was repeated again, even numbers added up, odd numbers added down, higher level to level, so just two slices of the orange to look at. And you have two images. The black and white and gray is the traditional MRI. That's why the word MRI is there. And the color part is the function that we detected. And this is looking at the house. You see a lot of blue here. You see no blue here. Because supposedly here we have emotions reacting to looking at the house, but no emotion from looking at the face, and no emotion from looking at the house. Physical evidence of that. But is it just the power of association? Let's use an analogy about the power of association. This is me in a party. That was a long time ago, about 2 weeks or so. And this is a famous place in France. You probably know. It's called the Élysée Palace. And this is the site where the President of France lives. And in your mind, you associate it with authority of the French government, And now, if I use Photoshop to overlap myself in front of that, in your mind, automatically and consciously, you believe that I'm an authority in the French government, that I'm associated with the French government, and I can order you to stay at home because I'm part of the French government. You're going to believe it. Yeah, look at him. He's in front of the Elysee Palace. You don't realize it's a Photoshop. Two things. Your attention goes to this one. You hear the word Elysee. Okay, this guy's from there. This is the power of association. You associated something you know and trust with someone you really don't know anything about, but you assume that he is the same. The same in brainwashing that was done since the Nazi and after that. You know, they give them 60% truth, 40% fake. They trust the truth because they check in on what they know, so they assume the rest is true, and that's how the fake news works. And in your mind, you think it's exactly the same as this guy. This guy is at the LSC, he's an authority who ordered you to stay home because of the coronavirus, and you're staying home because he's an authority. So in your mind, you say this and this is the same, when in reality, this guy has nothing to do with the French government, but you're not paying attention. It's okay. This guy is, but who's going to notice that? Nobody. So if we go back, we see the two images, the black and white and gray, is traditional MRI. The color is the functional MRI. So this is the Elysee Palace. This is me here, or it could be President Macron. That's what you have to decide if it is the same real or not. So let's look at problems with that. Number one, they tell you that the network is independent. What happened in network one has nothing to do with network two. And this is all done by people that have never ever seen one real human being with disease, never get the medication that alter the chemical to see what happened. It is like the people that live in China and India talking about France and French culture and so on, but they never been to France, never landed here, never walked, never saw it. They tell you wonderful things about France that if you live in France, you discover it's garbage, nonsense, not true. So let's look at two examples. Parkinson's disease is known to be caused by deficiency of dopamine. We give people dopamine, it fixes the disease. But if they cannot do it, according to phrenologists, they're stuck. There's the only network, other network have nothing to do with it. But according to neurologists who treated millions of people, give medication that say work on acetylcholine, you fix the disease in the same way. What? Yes, you can work in another network called acetylcholine to affect the dopamine. There's a relationship between the two. Another example, depression. We know depression is related to serotonin deficiency. We treat it by giving you medication that increases serotonin. What if you cannot take it? According to the functional MRI concepts, what they call the modern phrenologists, that's it, you're stuck. Because affecting the other system, they're independent, they have nothing to do with it. But in reality, that's not true. You cannot take medication that alters serotonin, no big deal. Give us something that increases norepinephrine. You cannot take it, give us something that increases dopamine. You cannot take it, we can even give us something that works on melatonin. Yeah, changing melatonin will change serotonin. Changing dopamine will change serotonin. Changing norepinephrine will change serotonin. In other words, the network are continuously interacting with each other. It's not as they claim they are independent of each other. That is unscientific. They say that they work in sequence. The ball goes from person A1 to B1 to C1 to D1 connected by the wires. But if you look at child age 8, when the wires did not develop yet, the picture of the brain function mind is exactly the same. The emotion, the ability is exactly the same. According to the theory, it shouldn't, but the studies prove that's not true. They don't have to be connected to get the function or to see it on function MRI. Highly questionable. They see that the centers are inactive at rest and active with cognition. When you're not thinking, it does nothing. When you think, it starts to become active. But when you look at energy consumption, we find that you consume more energy at rest than when you're working. The car consumes more gas when you're not running it, and when you run the car, it uses less gas. How could that be? Totally contradict that. As it's like working and earning money. You consume more energy when you work to earn money and less energy when you spend the money. Maybe when we are at rest, we are working, making chemicals that we need, and we have activity to just spend the chemicals. So that's why when you're at rest, we consume more energy. Like when you work, you consume more energy. When you do some activity, like spending the money, is much easier and faster. Other studies looking at energy consumption found that the difference is so little to really be reliably measured. It's all imagination. Again, about being inactive at rest and active with activity. They did an experiment where they put goggles in your eyes, flash some light, you look and tell what color, what shape, and you're thinking about it. According to phrenology or function MRI, you should have more brain activity, you should have more bold signal. And if we give you anesthesia, you're not looking at the color and shape, you should be using less energy, less bold signal. But in reality, it's the opposite. When you're under anesthesia, not think about anything, we flash the goggles, bright signal. When you awake looking at it, it's much less. Totally contradict what the theory goes. Another important thing, this is a typical cell in the brain communicating with the cell here. You get the signal, increase calcium, and you have this chemicals package. It's like bags of money. When you need the money, you open the bag, you let the money out in large quantities. They're supposed to go back as well. So we know physically we can see brain cells storing vesicles of chemicals in quantities. And so think about that. It says that I don't work unless I need money. So I find I need a shoes for 20 euros. So I stop resting at home, go earn the 20 euros, buy the shoes and rest. Then I should not have no savings, no money. Why are we storing the brain chemicals? If we only make it when we need it, it doesn't make sense. They looked at the time relationship between activity, disactivity, and found there's no relationship. And if it was true that you're only active when you need something and you're inactive when you don't need it, then you shouldn't have money saved. You shouldn't have chemicals saved, but we do. And time relationship between that is not consistent. Areas of activation and deactivation are not consistent in all studies. If you do a certain task, group A will do until it's in that location, group B will tell you it's a different location, group C in a different location. Well, it should be all in the same location. You should find the same thing in all studies by all people the same. But in reality, that is not. Another problem about the bold signal claim to be a represent cognitive ability because you're thinking that if you change your breathing pattern without changing your thinking, you can change the functional MRI image, you can change the bold signal. You're in mental rest, you're not doing anything, you just change how fast or slow you breathe, you change that. So how could it be coming from your thinking? How could it be evidence of thinking? It's not. I know as a neurologist that certain locations in the brain need more oxygen than others. We know people that get cardiac arrest, you have cardiac arrest for 1 minute, you them at certain location, 2 minutes, you them at the first location plus new location, 3 minutes, you go to a third part, and so on. So not all areas of the brain have the same needs for oxygen. Some needs more oxygen, some need less oxygen, some need very little oxygen. So the difference in the bold signal could be just physiological based on the different needs in different parts of the brain. Function MRI uses statistical numbers, and to do the number, you do subtraction, mathematics, of the activity at rest with the activity with cognitions. And they did studies to show that this is a fallacy because the difference between the two is only 4%. And by doing the subtraction of number that varied, goes up and down significantly, it's very difficult, if not impossible. An analogy, an example would be like you standing in a very noisy place, trying to listen to somebody, and they change the voice by 4%, and you claim that, yes, I can hear the difference consistently. I can draw it. I can do all of that. Many people believe that's an illusion, imagination. Do something called continuous recording of oxygen extraction factor. They measure how much oxygen is sucked out of the blood physically and found that at rest, while you're doing nothing, it's not that straight flat lines, continuously going up and down. So our needs for oxygen are normally without any mental activity fluctuates up and down. So the claim that when you're at rest there's no activity is not true. This signal is probably based on some neurophysiology, not neurocognition. You think, you don't think, it doesn't matter. It changes up and down in the same way. Let's look at what harm done to the society, according to me, by this functional MRI. I give you some example of what I call pseudoscience in action. Some anthropologists claim that she found the love center in the brain in part called the VTA, ventral tegmental area. And it was on every television, every newspaper, everywhere you go, maps of the brain mapping, hallelujah. We found the love center in the brain. We have in the left part of the brain in the center a speech center. We know that if you damage it, 100% of people, 100% of the time will lose speech. So it should be the same with the love center. But no, there are hundreds of thousands, not millions of people that had stroke that damaged the VTA. How many of them lost love for the family? Have you ever heard of anyone have a stroke that caused him to lose love for his wife or his children, his family? No. How could that be? We know there's a speech center in the left midfrontal area because if you stimulate it, start to produce sound. What if you stimulate the VTA should have more love or maybe less love or something? They went and did that stimulated. Nothing happened. People said, I'm hungry, I want to eat. And that's it. So maybe it's related to appetite, but it has nothing to do with love. It is, in my opinion, pseudoscience in action, using the questionable science of functional MRI to find phrenology again. We find a center for everything. Center for honesty, integrity, for love, for hate, for jealousy. We will do functional MRI, will find it. You tell me what you want. In one presentation, a person who writes a lot about functional MRI, the wonderful machine, the miracle of modern time, and all of that, claimed that the hypothalamus is located in the ventral tegmental area. I found that interesting. If you live in France, you know Paris and the area a little bit, you can have a problem with somebody coming to tell you that, oh, the country of Belgium is located in the Isle of Cité. Why that? It's a different country from France. Be it too big, Isle of Cité is too small. The hypothalamus is the size of an almond. The VTA is 2 millimeter by 3 millimeter. How on earth can you put an almond inside a 2 by 3 millimeter thing? It's not. But it doesn't matter. You can go to India and China and talk about France. The Elysee Palace is in the Isle of Cité, and the Eiffel Tower is whatever in Bordeaux. They have no idea whatever you tell them. They vaguely heard about it. They're impressed. You can sell them so much. And so on. I can spend an hour talking about that, but we have enough time. More harm, they say that they found the chemical basis of personality. Yes, every personality is based on one chemical substance, and thank God we have functional MRI, and we found it. And now we can help you to find the personality that you have and other people's personality. And yes, we found that Bill Clinton personality is based on estrogen. Yes, he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, but that has nothing to do with testosterone. That was estrogen. And his wife, Hillary Clinton personality is definitely based on functional MRI, based on testosterone. She lost the presidential election because they did not give her enough testosterone. And if they give her more, she could have won it. This is science. And based on that, we figured out personalities. Now we're going to do a personality testing. Now we have to do chemistry.com and this.com and every website, listen to them and had this personality testing so you can find whether the other person have a matching personality or not. And based on that, you'll find the perfect mate Can you find happiness? But do you know anybody who had a personality test and find happiness based on that? I personally don't believe in it. But luckily, finally, after 50 years, which is actually faster than what happened with phrenology, functional MRI started to fall down. It came in 1990, became widely used to study emotions, personality, cognition, things that are not objective to see. But just 4 years later, an English doctor, a neurologist called Carl Finstone, realized that the activation could have occurred by chance. A woman drives her car with brown shoes all the time. One day she buys red shoes, get a car accident. You try to say the car accident happened because of the red shoes. Anyway, it happened by chance, coincidence. It has nothing to do with the change of the car accident. It's like if you utter my name and it rains, so it rains because you uttered my name. It's not. If it rain doesn't rain, it's by chance. 2009, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, look at the statistical method used in functional MRI. And the conclusion, and I quote, puzzlingly high correlation in functional MRI, you see the small fMRI, studies of emotions, personality, and social cognition. What they mean by puzzlingly high correlation? Imagine a guy goes and buy the lotto ticket in January and he wins the lotto. You say, lucky guy. The guy goes in February, buy the second lotto ticket and he wins it again. Wow, that's incredible. He goes in March and buy the lotto and he wins it in March. He said, no, that's hard to believe. Something fishy here. He goes in April and buy the lotto, wins it, and everybody said, no, I don't believe it. This is garbage. He goes in May and wins the lotto again. Then you say, no, this is puzzlingly high correlation. That is puzzling. That doesn't make sense. And then when they looked, they found that more than 50% of the studies use statistical method that guarantees high correlation. We can use a statistical method to get you what you want to find. So they felt that was the case. More than half of them was just statistical manipulation. And it's all based on numbers, statistical manipulation. Number give you any pictures you want. 2009, a doctor called Dr. Bennett decided to duplicate a study of human reaction to happy faces and angry faces. Somebody did a study on people, showed them happy faces, angry faces, used the wonderful machine, the miracle of modern technology, functional MRI, and this is the area that reacts when you see happy faces. This is the happiness center of your brain. And when you look at angry face, this is the angry center of your brain. And here is that. So Dr. Bennett decided to duplicate it, but accidentally, he changed the experiment a little bit. He used, instead of human, salmon. And as he repeated exactly the same happy and angry faces, wow, the brain of salmon is reacting to that. They found areas of activation in the brain of the salmon. That means the salmon reacts to your facial expression. That means if you have a fish tank now, you better go and smile at it. So the fish will feel happy, recognize your happy face. Because if you frown, the fish will be upset and will be hurt by that. So be kind to your fish in the fish tank. Or even better, my favorite part is that that fish was dead. He bought it from the supermarket that morning. But hallelujah, that means dead fish reacts to our emotion. If we smile on it or frown on it, it affects them, it bothers them, it causes them pain. So please do me a favor. Next time you go on Saturday to the marché to buy fish, before you cook it, make sure you smile on it. Because even though it's dead, it recognizes whether you're happy or not based on scientific evidence done by functional MRI. And based on that, next year, a doctor at Stanford called Dr. Paul Rack demanded that everybody doing functional MRI studies should deposit the data in a repository so other researchers can look at it. And guess what happened? Most people never submitted their studies. I'm not going to give it to somebody else to look at it. Well, I thought that was interesting. If you have nothing to hide, you give it to everybody else. Look at it. I have nothing to hide. But it's maybe they didn't have the time or whatever. 2016 was a bad year for functional MRI because the National Academy of Science in USA, which is a very well respected organization set by the federal government of USA, did the largest study ever of a functional MRI data and published that and found that what? 73% false positive results. False positive meaning there's nothing there and you find it. It's not raining outside in Paris, but your test tell you it's raining. And you can look, there's no rain. So you're wrong 73% of the time, and you're right, hopefully by my opinion, by coincidence, 27% of the time. So you're correct 27% of the time when you do an experiment. So let's look at another scientific method of study. It's called tossing a coin. You throw it up, see it falls head or tails. What are your chances of getting a correct results in that? Which are exactly 50%. Which means what? Tossing a coin is more predictive than functional MRI. So if you want to do a study and you have a choice between functional MRI and tossing a coin, I recommend you use tossing a coin. It's cheaper, faster, easier, and it is more reliable. But don't say that to anybody who sells you a book about functional MRI. 2016, the proceeding National Academy of Science recommended what? Recall of all functional MRI studies, 40,000 of them. They conclude that this is all pseudoscience, this is garbage, this should be all recalled. The only liability, the National Academy of Science, part of the US federal government, so it's under political control and some political manipulation. Same year, a competing journal called Science published information from the competition, which is unusual in medical journals, to see that brain scans are prone to false positive. They felt it's so significant that their audience should know about it. Yes, it's a news from a competing place, but you have to know about it. Another competing journal is Nature. And based on that, they demand that if you want us to publish fMRI study, you have to give us your data to send it to other people. Sorry, we don't trust you completely. We have to investigate or give it to somebody else. The next year, NIH reacted and redefined the trial criteria, how to do studies using functional MRI. And what was the reaction according to the Science Journal? Massive behavior scientist objection. No, you can't do that. Are you crazy? You want us to follow the scientific method? No. And several neurocognitive scientific societies flooded the NIH with letters expressing concern about the change. We don't want to give our data to somebody else to look at it. No, 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 no. We do it all ourselves, and so on. And we don't give the data somebody blinded, doesn't know which patient had what, and so on, like we do in medical study. No, no, that's not permitted. Very interesting. And as they do more studies, found that if you repeat the same study by another institution, you always get a different results. In medicine, every study had to be repeated by a different institution to make sure that the finding is true. But when they do it in functional MRI, every time it comes different. Even a better study, they have the same place, do the same study in different days. And look at the results. It's not the same. It's the same only 30% of the time. 70% of the time, it is different. Compare that to tossing a coin. You get it correct 50% of the time. So tossing a coin is again in a different way, different study, is more reliable than functional MRI. Let's look at some statistics today to give you a little bit of a sense where functional MRI fits in reality. In the USA today, there's 16,366 neurologists. I can assure you that more than 99.9% of them have never ever ordered one single functional MRI in their entire career in the past 50 years. I have practiced in USA, ordered tens of thousands of traditional MRI. I know thousands of neurologists I don't know one single one that have ordered functional MRI. In USA, the 3,689 neurosurgeons, more than 99% have never ever ordered one single functional MRI in the past 50 years. None. If you look worldwide, you find that neurosurgeons, about 50,000 of them, more than 99.9%, have never ordered a single functional MRI in their entire careers. Only a very small number in USA order functional MRI to look at the speech center for certain cases, and 1% is way an exaggerated number. It's a lot less than that. But it happened, so I had to mention that. Because the speech center is superficial, just under the skull. It uses a lot of oxygen than other parts of the brain, so you can possibly see. So sometimes it's used. Some other statistics, total number of insurance companies in America that will cover functional MRI is zero. But the percentage of insurance companies you see that cover traditional MRI is what? 100%. Yeah, an MRIs will pay for it. Functional MRI, no. Now, sorry, sir, we don't pay for it. So the total number of claims paid by insurance company functional MRIs is almost zero. Few were paid because the patient was crazy, drove them nuts. They got tired of fighting with him. It's cheaper just pay for the functional MRI and tell him goodbye. But in reality, it is not. And almost all functional MRI studies are done by the so-called soft scientists, people that have the so-called PhD, doctorate degree in philosophy. It's called philosophy because you cannot physically measure philosophy. You cannot take pictures of philosophy. So psychology, sociology, anthropology, all of these are soft sciences. It could be correct. People have PhD in mathematics, which is real, but you cannot take pictures of mathematics. You can physically measure mathematics. That's why it falls under philosophy, PhD. So some of the philosophy might be physical, true, might be not. We don't know. So when most of them are done by these people in soft sciences, people in medicine generally don't use it. So functional MRI, in my opinion, is the new tool of phrenology. Now we find a new way to tell you here is the love center, the hate center, the jealousy center. This is the hope for past, this is hope for the future. Same thing at the past, but now we find a new technique. The caliber for measuring it didn't work. Now we have something better. And functional MRI users are still trying to find one location in the brain for each and every emotion, each and every thought process, trying to again redraw the same old phrenology maps of the mind, but now using a different toy. Instead of the caliber measuring the skull tend to be nonsense, now we have the functional MRI, but we're going to prove to you the same thing again. History always repeats itself. So he was right, Mark Twain, when he said long time ago that it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Nobody likes to be told that no, you have been deceived. Me, no, I'm smart. I can tell true news from fake news right away. And if you say that, it's you who doesn't know. It's human nature, and it's our nature. So, final words. Functional MRI is used to study human behavior even today by the same people, but the number of studies is luckily going down. And some recent publication to give an idea where we are, that sort of pseudoscience doesn't stop. Biopsychology. They're going to tell about your mind, psychological condition, again using functional MRI. I hope now when you see that, see the small fMRI, functional MRI, you start to think, should I believe it or not? It's up to you. But I don't. Another study called mind reading with functional MRI. You can use it to read people's minds. Yes, the person next to you hates you, and you can read that. Oh, yes, they're thinking that they hate me. Just get a functional MRI, they're going to tell you that. And look at the bottom. They can now reconstruct your dreams. I can explain to you why you dreamed yesterday that there was a dragon chasing you. How? We're going to use a functional MRI to do that. in my opinion, is garbage. These people either believe it or fake they believe it, I don't know. And I love this on YouTube. If you want to, you can do mind control of other people in everyday life, and not one way, 10 ways. And it's based on functional MRI studies. They use functional MRI to find out how you can mind control. So the guy next to you that drives you nuts, that you can't stand him anymore, now you can go there watch and how you can make him jump out of the window. He's gone forever, will never bother you again. Functional MRI will help us to achieve that. What are my predictions about future of functional MRI studies? I know it eventually will disappear when a new tool, a new toy they find for the phrenologist to again go back and find one location in the brain for everything, because we as humans love to hear that, to find that. We get excited when we get the news, oh, they found the center for whatever it is, the center for guilt in the brain, the center for honesty in the brain. Oh, good, look for it. And you watch it, and newspapers sell more news. Very good. Keep spreading it. TV, more people watch it, spread it. Social media, send it to everybody. This is wonderful. We love that garbage, so the garbage will never go away. It's our fault, not anything else. So sadly, the cycle will repeat itself again and again. And which year, when people ask me, will pseudoscience disappear? I always give people an exact date. It's going to happen exactly 1 year after we reach infinity. In other words, pseudoscience will never disappear. It's part of the human nature. There are always people who want more than what reality can offer. And when there's a buyer, there's always a seller who will find a way to sell you the dream that is not impossible. And in the same way, this will be the same year that fake news will end. Fake news, as old as the human race, will continue forever because somehow we love it. We like to hear the impossible and convince ourselves to believe it. However, there are positive aspects of pseudoscience. As I said, there's always another side to every story. So I talk to you again and again about the harm from pseudoscience. Let me change gear and talk to you about the benefit of pseudoscience. Some gains that happen to the society of pseudoscience. First one is this is the opera, the famous opera called the Elixir d'Amour, the Elixir of Love by Donizetti. It's a famous opera where there's this scientist, a doctor, goes dressed very nicely, look at the thing, very elegant thing, goes to the town to tell them how well qualified he is, how successful, how it's the state of the art, how all of that, and they're going to sell you medicine for anything you can dream of. And he had the cure. So a guy called Nemorino, who loves a girl that doesn't love him, gives him all his money to get in exchange the Elixir d'Amour, a bottle of port wine. But Nemorino believed that it is Elixir d'Amour, and he drinks it and starts to believe that it's working. And here he goes, sorry, and listen to that. You probably heard and know the story. One lonely tear in her eye is the evidence that the elixir of love is working. And now, finally, she's falling in love with him. Thank God for this great scientist who sold him this wonderful medicine called Porto wine for all his money. He found finally happiness and joy because of this magical elixir. So there's positive sign. Some people are happy with the pseudoscience and the garbage. They find what they dream of that's impossible, but they're happy with it, excited about it, which is good. And me, being an authority in France, as you can tell, being equal to Macron, he can order you to stay at home. I can do the same. I cannot. And if you believe that, maybe I can also get some secondary benefits from the pseudoscience of functional MRI and the power of association. I tell you that I'm an authority in France. And if you want, I have a good deal for you. And if you send me your name, your phone number, how much money you're at the bank, I have a good deal for you. And don't forget that I can sell you this wonderful steel building in Paris for a very good price. It's called the Eiffel Tower. Me being an authority in France, as you have seen me standing in front of the Élysée Palace, I have to be an authority and give me your money, and I give you the hope. I close with this saying by Abraham Lincoln, the famous American president, that you can fool all the people some of the time. Yes, some of the people will be fooled for a period of time, like people in the 19th century. All of them believe that phrenology was a real science. You can fool some of the people all the time, like people that today who believe that phrenology is real, who buy the books, the models, and believe there's a center in the brain for love and hate and jealousy and all of that. But luckily, there's some people like me and you, hopefully, who cannot be fooled all the time, eventually realize the truth. And with that, I will stop and tell you again the goal of this discussion, which might be too technical for you, but just to make the point that please, if you buy and read a book about love and use it to make decision, make sure that you understand whether the information is based on functional MRI or not. And if it is, if you believe in it, go and do what's in the book. It's fine, it's your decision. And if you believe in that, also do me a favor and buy the Eiffel Tower for me. But if you are convinced that it's a questionable science, then maybe you should avoid these books and look for books that are based on reality, based on the truth, and stop buying the elixir of love from this good-looking doctor that traveling from town to town, selling you Porto wine that will change your life. And we have to be honest, it might happen. So good luck. I stop at that and I stop the recording and we'll start to take some questions.